This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Stop waiting around for the perfect candidate. Instead, use Indeed sponsored jobs to find the right people with the right skills fast. It's a simple way to make sure your listing is the first candidates see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs have 4 times more applicants than non-sponsored jobs. So go build your dream team today with Indeed. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
This episode is brought to you by Redfin. You're listening to a podcast, which means you're probably multitasking. Maybe even scrolling home listings on Redfin, saving homes without expecting to get them. But Redfin isn't just built for endless browsing. It's built to help you find and own a home. With agents who close twice as many deals, when you find the one, you've got a real shot at getting it. Get started at redfin.com. Own the dream.
Welcome to Supernatural Circumstances, the podcast where we take you down the rabbit hole into the fantastic world of the strange, the paranormal, and the unknown. I'm Morgan Knudsen. Come along with me on this week's adventure. I am so excited to be able to share today with you because it's a very special episode. And I've mentioned before on the show that I'd been in the hospital back in November. And today we're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about it with a very, very special guest, somebody who means a lot to me and who I think can understand the healing journey better than anybody. Dr. Eben Alexander is the New York Times best-selling author of Proof of Heaven, along with a number of other incredible books that you guys can find links to in the show notes. And he had, for those who are not familiar with him, he's been on the show numerous times before, but he had an incredible near-death experience after a horrendous case of meningitis, and his brain function basically quit completely. And when he woke up from his coma, he had not only reported a journey that was absolutely remarkable, but met his sister who had passed away, whom he had never met. He had no idea who she was. And he ended up calling her the girl on the butterfly wings. It was a remarkable story. And you guys can go back on the shows here and find that journey that we've sort of gone on together through a number of episodes. But I highly recommend reading Proof of Heaven. We are going to talk today about how this stuff is crucial to our healing, our spiritual healing, physical, all of it. And we're going to unpack a lot of that today, and the importance of sound in both spiritual and physical changes in the body. So buckle up. This is going to be an incredible conversation. Let's go.
TaxAct knows every small business owner has different tax filing needs. With TaxAct, you can file yourself with the help of an expert, or TaxAct can do it all for you. You're the boss, the head honcho, the top banana. And TaxAct is like your loyal, trusty tax aide, ready to pounce on any tax needs you might have. TaxAct is dying to pounce on some small business tax needs. TaxAct. Let's get them over with.
Well, this is going to be such a great conversation. I know I'm ready to share some things that I haven't yet before, and I'm really grateful, Dr. Alexander, that you're the one that I get to share them with. So thank you so much for being here.
Well, Morgan, thanks so much for having me on again. It's great to be with you today.
It's just so good to see you. And, every time we've had a conversation, I have come out further ahead, I feel, than what I was before. And recently, I'll talk about this a little bit, because recently, in November, and many of the people that have listened over the last number of months know that I was in the hospital with a severe GI bleed. And not only did I make it through that brought me be close to a near-death experience of my own, but also 5 days in the hospital that were very, very trying with people who did not see my well-being and refused to see my well-being and not wanting to help me forward.
Uh,
So it was, I fell back on every single thing that I've talked about on the show, that I've talked about with you and Karen. Um, it has been a, a very spiritual experience. And
mhm,
as I was saying to you before we started, a remembering of who I really am and my own well-being, even when other people couldn't see it.
mhm. Well, it's fascinating, but it's all the more reason to get this kind of story out to the world so people who are facing the kind of challenge that you had back in November can go at it with some real spiritual strength and, hope for soul growth to come out of it all. How did all that
Absolutely.
unfold for you in terms of the illness, how sudden it was, and kind of your recognition of all that, and kind of any elements that helped you kind of rise above it because of our spiritual discussions?
Well, it started out oddly enough with a bout of food poisoning.
Uh-huh.
And the vomiting from the food poisoning tore my stomach. And so the one day my stomach had just had enough and it just decided, okay, that's it. And I literally was looking at sitting in my own blood in the middle of my apartment. It was it was unbelievable. And I didn't know at that point what the hell was going to happen. But what was interesting was that my mom, who's a registered nurse, thankfully was home, and knew what to do, called 911. And interestingly, as dire as it looked, my instinct, mentally, internally, everything was like, no, 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 you're going to be okay. Like, it's
Mhm.
okay. It's okay, which is weird when you're sitting there in that much of a mess. But it's like, no, 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 it's all right. And so I thought, okay, I'm just gonna go with it. And I was very careful to keep my intellect about me because I'm like, I know I need to be asking questions. I have to be very aware, like just intellectually as well.
Mhm.
And so I ended up in the hospital twice with this. And the second round, I ended up with some nursing care and doctors who were lovely, and I kudos to them. They were wonderful, but the majority of them were not.
Mm.
And they not only were telling me bad news every 5 minutes, but they ended up, even though I was prescribed a full diet, would not feed me. I ended up in the hospital 5 days with almost no food.
Mhm.
Um,
Right.
and it was, I have to say, like, there are moments where I was just going, I don't know if I'm going to make it out of here, not because of the illness, but
Mhm.
because of the care that was going on. And
That's
that's when I really found that I was leaning back on so much of what you and I have discussed, where I was
Mhm.
just like, the external circumstances don't determine my well-being and my course through this. They just don't. This is up to my ability to surrender, my ability to trust, my knowledge of my own well-being, and that there's beings that are looking after me, that I'm not alone. All of those things really, really came to fruition for me. And that's honestly that's what pulled me through it.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that it sounds like some of your healthcare workers were not necessarily quite up to full speed, and I'm sorry to hear that, but I also am very happy to hear that others were, and that you were able to basically call on your inner strength, your knowing, your ability to trust in the universe. I mean, these are some of the most beautiful gifts we get out of these stories.
Yeah.
Is trust, and from the touchstone, of so many who have had these experiences, we can simply, learn more about that literature. Go to the various websites that have near-death experiences
Yeah.
by the thousands. The two that I usually recommend are the International Association of Near-Death Studies, the IANDS.org website. Excellent repository of these stories where anybody can leave their stories, and you can access thousands of such stories. And also Jeff and Jody Long's site, NDERF.org. That's for the NDE Research Foundation.org, and they do a great job too, and excellent analysis. But people can educate themselves on these kind of cases and learn a lot more about what the actual events that have occurred in other people's lives that have allowed manifestation of a near-death experience, which is merely an example of mind over matter that's far more powerful than, say, placebo effect and even spontaneous remissions. But when you start finding miraculous healing in some of these near-death experience cases, you realize we have a lot more power to kind of bring healing and wholeness to ourselves. And that, I think, is a beautiful lesson. Of course, as a physician, I'm always a gigantic fan of having the medical community, the doctors, the nurses, all the medical staff that participate in healthcare contributing to the growth and optimal transformation that such health challenges can bring to us. But ultimately, they can serve to be tremendous lessons about our potential, as beings to have a will over our future and what happens. And that's especially important in our healthcare and healing and wholeness. But I love hearing your story that, in fact, you had gained such kind of trust and understanding so that even when the system at large was not necessarily serving your highest interests, you were able to kind of muster that. I mean, you look great. You look like you came through all this, and thank God your mother's an RN and she was around to help. That clearly played into this whole thing and contributed to your well-being and survival.
Oh, without a doubt, and I think that's I think the one thing that I would love for to see more of in the medical field, because that was the one thing while I was in the hospital on IV meds that I really noticed was the lack of not only the spiritual side to a lot of these people that were dealing with me, but their attitudes about it. Which was so disheartening because as I was sort of moving through and trying to reaffirm my wellness and making sure that that was the dialogue that I had going on within myself as I say, falling back on everything that we've talked about, having them come in and say, well, why are you so calm? And I would say because I'm going to go home. And they were like, "Well, I don't understand. I don't understand why you're so calm. You know you're gonna die." And I was like, that not only is that not true, because it was blatantly untrue. Even my vital stats, when my mom was looking at my vital, she's like, "This you're okay. Like you're healing. You're not well, but you're healing." And it was like, what a how is that enhancing the spirituality of and the connectedness that a patient needs to move through anything?
Well, from my perspective, that kind of a statement just reflects a lack of experience and kind of an unprofessional attitude. And of course, not knowing more, I certainly don't want to pass judgment on anybody. But I can simply say, as a physician and a neurosurgeon, I've dealt with, thousands of patients who are threatened with death. And the deep truth is we're all going to die at some point. There's
Right.
no big magic there. But the reality is I never would take away hope from my patients. And I dealt with a lot of patients with glioblastomas. And in the medical community, those are known as some of the deadliest kinds of tumors you can have, a malignant brain tumor.
Sure.
And I dealt with thousands of such patients, some of whom were told they would be dead, within 6 months. That was back in the early 90s, who still reach out to me by email. They proved people wrong. And I love it
Yeah.
when patients prove their doctors wrong and kind of outlive expectations. In fact, I've heard some very humorous stories of the occasional old-fashioned doctor who was kind of loudly announcing that someone was, close to death and not going to make it, and then the patient outlives the doctor. So you
Oh
hear
my
those
gosh.
stories many a time, and they're always kind of, you know, I like hearing that. The
I
patients,
can't blame you.
so it's, but most of the physicians and nurses and healthcare staff that I've worked with, have, I think, kind of carried the same attitude I did. We're
Yeah.
not we can't predict what's gonna happen with somebody, and even someone who has a very dire illness, like my meningitis is one example.
Right.
Certainly, all those patients with brain tumors, GI bleeds is threatened you back in November. Those can be terrifically, life-altering and dangerous,
Yeah.
and yet look at you. So, you proved them wrong, that's a great
Yeah.
thing, and those are the kind of stories that I like to share with people. Put them out there, people who, take a responsibility for their own healing, because ultimately, what we're talking about here, this primacy of mind and eternity of soul, is really about the influence that we as sentient beings have over our emergent reality.
Yeah.
And we have a lot more power than we think. And another statement I often make along these lines is, be careful what you believe. And the reason is, your beliefs can be falsely limiting just as
Yeah.
much as they can be, too wide open. And I love, in our book, Proof of Heaven, we have a quote from Soren Kierkegaard, where we say there are two ways to be fooled. One is to believe what isn't true, but the other is to refuse to believe what is true.
Oh,
And
yes.
especially with quantum physics and with, a lot of modern medical observations of people, thriving and surviving over incredible illnesses, we find that it's important to acknowledge that people can have an influence on their own well-being, on their own healing and wholeness. And from my perspective, the shortcut to the big answer is to live your life with unconditional love, kindness, compassion, mercy, acceptance, forgiveness for self and for others.
Yeah.
And, kind of honoring the higher soul and the highest good and the win-win situation. I learned, in my NDE to look at those who before my coma I might have seen as my enemy or my nemesis, preventing me from getting something I
Right.
wanted in life. And after my coma, I realized they were near and dear soul mates, and that we were trying to teach each other especially challenging lessons. And along those lines, I would quote, and I have to paraphrase here, but Confucius, the great Chinese sage from thousands of years ago, said, if you find something objectionable in another, look inside yourself. And I think that's kind of right at the heart of it. And the more we can show love and compassion and kindness for our fellow beings, and that begins with showing true kind of compassion for ourselves as the divine, spiritual, interconnected souls that we are. And start sharing that with the world and acknowledging that we have power, and with that power comes responsibility.
Yeah.
That's a very important aspect of it, and that's why life reviews, I think, that occur in about half of all near-death experiences, life reviews are a very important ingredient. They're essentially, the golden rule, treat others as you would like to be treated, written into the very fabric of the universe. And the reason I can
Yeah.
say that is that, something like, around 80 some percent of people who have had, life reviews, in a near-death experience describe it as from the perspective of everyone involved. So if you've been
Mhm.
handing out pain and suffering to others in the life review, that comes back at you. So
Yeah.
in other words, golden rule, treat others as you would like to be treated. It's very firmly established in the literature on near-death experiences. It's something we should all expect. And as my wife, Karen Newell, who's also the co-author of our book, Living in a Mindful Universe, and I often say, do a daily review. That's what Karen told me. Why wait for a life review? Every day, make amends, you know, make sure that the way you treat yourself and others, and even
Yeah.
think about yourself and others, reflects the very positive kind of aspects of this soul journey that we uncover through these kinds of stories and sharings. So we should all be living that way. And we'd be a lot better off, especially when we get to the end of our lives. I can't imagine anything worse than being the hardcore materialist like I was before my coma, believing that only
Right.
the physical world exists and brain creates consciousness, and then getting to the end and having these loved ones come to me who had passed over already from, adoptive and birth families to welcome me there and realizing they're really here. They're not imaginary. This is not
Yeah.
wishful thinking, but our souls are truly eternal. That's what people who have had NDEs have proven to themselves, certainly, and to others as they share these stories. But it really is about growing into that higher soul. And, you can pat the little ego voice in your head, pat it on its back and put it in timeout for a while with meditation. But to me, meditation, centering prayer are all ways that anybody, you don't have to have a near-death experience to get to this kind of knowledge. You just have to be aware and awake. And sadly, many of us are not really that awake. This is about awakening to that kind of higher soul and that grander aspect of self. And when you
Oh,
realize the whole
absolutely.
scientific world in terms of brain and mind and consciousness, a lot of people who have studied these questions deeply are starting to move into that territory where they acknowledge the kind of fundamental eternity of soul and interconnection of
Yeah.
soul that all these stories are demonstrating to us.
Oh, absolutely, and eh, I love what Karen was saying about the life review and being conscious and present daily, because I think that's so key, is that people often have an idea of, oh, if you're a good person, then it's about karma, that there's good people always get good things back, and it's really they've got sort of I think a skewed version of karma, and not understanding that it's really about being present and what you're attracting. It's what
Mhm.
your thoughts are. It's about what you're telling yourself. It's not whether or not your ego has determined whether you're good or bad. It's
Right.
something far deeper, where when we're moving forward and we're being present of others. And I mean, my little snake Galen, I mean, he was hands down the one of the top supports that I had getting through this. And bless his heart, as upset as he was about everything that had happened, when I got home from the hospital, he changed his sleep schedule, his natural sleep schedule, to match mine so
Mhm.
that he could be up with me when I needed him.
That's
And
fantastic.
it was
That's
just
beautiful.
incredible. And, this little guy who's usually, I mean, he's up and he's playing and he's busy and he wants to go do his thing. And if I needed to sit down because I was still having dizzy spells during that time period, I had seizures when it happened. So I'm still
Mhm.
dealing with some of the neurological effects from that, even now.
Mhm.
But bless his heart, it was like, oh, Mummy needs to sit down. And he would come and he would sit with me and he would put his little tail over my arm, over my leg, and he would just sit with me until I was ready to get back up.
Beautiful.
And, and here he was, this little soul being understanding what you just said,
Mm.
and understanding that presence, understanding that this is something that, we do daily with each other.
Mhm.
And it doesn't, like you saying, it doesn't have to start with some great big catastrophic event. This is things that we can do daily. Now, you were mentioning a little bit about a little bit about your experience in connecting with these entities and these spirits. Did you find once you had come out of the coma, did you find that that connection with them continued into your healing?
Yes, it has.
Yeah.
Now, important to point out that a lot of that has been through meditation.
Yeah. Yeah.
And initially, for one thing, it took me 2 months after my coma for all of my memories to return, because one of the unusual aspects of my near-death experience was a complete amnesia for my life. I had no memories of my life, of Earth, humanity, this universe. And in the months and years after the coma, I came to see why that was. But in the initial phases of trying to understand it all after, 2 months post coma, when my memories had all returned and uh, my approach to it was really reading books. I was reading other people's spiritual experiences. I was reading about quantum physics, kind of advancing my knowledge of the deepest aspects of neuroscience and kind of origins of consciousness. And I read about 150 books over those first 2 years. But I came to realize, no, the only way to really start to understand that experience I had that was so vexing and completely defied everything that I thought I knew about neuroscience, because meningitis is such a perfect model for human death by
Right.
wrecking the neocortex. And I had a very global case. It was all over my brain. There was no place left unscathed. And so that was a starting point. Um, but of course, I realized I had to meditate. I had to start going within, and that was somewhere around about 2 years post coma that I really committed to a major program of daily and regular meditation. And it's right around that time that two things happened. Really, I was invited to go speak at the Monroe Institute and to start teaching one of their courses called Lifelines. And they thought I was fully qualified for that because of my NDE, et cetera.
Yeah.
So all that happened, but also around the same time, I found an article in Scientific American from, I think, October of 1973 or maybe 74, I think 73, by Gerald Oster, and it's called Auditory Beats in the Brain. And it's all about the phenomenon of binaural beats generated by slightly different tones in the two ears.
Yeah.
And it's a phenomenon that had been discovered in the 1800s by a Prussian physicist, a Wilhelm Heinrich Dove. And he knew that with tuning forks, a pure tone in one ear, a slightly different tone in the other ear, and the brain generates this wavering wah, 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 wah sound that matches the arithmetic difference between the two. So if I put 104 hertz in here, 100 hertz in here, I get a 4 hertz signal. And that's the general rule. And it works up to about anywhere from, a fraction of a cycle per second up to about 20 cycles per second. And beyond 20 cycles per second, the signals kind of lose each other. So it doesn't work. But binaural beats can be generated anywhere in that kind of zero point 0.1 to 20 hertz range, and you can use multiple carrier tones. And so all of it is a fascinating thing because it causes this oscillation down the lower brainstem. And we've all heard of, for example, using an oscillating pendulum for hypnotic, where
Sure.
you get a deep transcendental state through hypnosis. Likewise, EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprocessing, is a very powerful and effective technique for alleviating post-traumatic stress disorder, which is a big thing in our modern society. A lot of people have been traumatized, and EMDR is an excellent way. And there you're using the midbrain and rapid eye movements to induce these kind of higher states of consciousness that I believe in many ways put us in a hypnagogic state, that is between awake and asleep. They allow us to bypass the little voice in our head, the little ego voice, and that is not who we are. Very important to point out.
No.
Voice in your head, as Michael Singer puts it in his book, The Untethered Soul, says that voice in your head is your annoying roommate. Yes,
Yes.
absolutely true. Don't start thinking that is your soul or who you ultimately are. There are parts of you that you can discover through meditation, centering prayer, that are much more interconnected with the God force of the universe and with all other souls. So meditation is a great way to get there. And that's where I got started. And in fact, at that time, Karen and I met at the Monroe Institute, and also I met her friend and future business partner, Kevin Cossie. And the two of them are what formed up Sacred Acoustics. But at the time, Kevin was doing some very good work generating audio files with powerful binaural beats, and he's a master at putting these together. And Karen and Kevin shared some of their tones with me, and I said, "This stuff is great." I mean, it was only for their use at the time. But I said, "You really should get this out to the world." And I'll never forget the first time I was up there actually wheeling and dealing with publishers before Proof of Heaven came out. I was in New York City and got to connect up with Kevin. And he, had this little EEG device that we used to kind of get a crude approximation of brainwave symmetry between frontal lobes. And I was listening to their tones and off and running. It just was amazing stuff. And so
Wow.
I encouraged them to get together and start putting these out to the world. And so sacredacoustics.com is the resource for anybody interested. I will say that there was a beautiful pilot study that was done by Dr. Anna Yusum, and it's in the peer-reviewed literature. It came out in the Journal of Nervous and Mental Diseases in February of 2020, right at the beginning of the pandemic. And that pilot study used something called the Whole Mind Bundle that's still available on Sacred Acoustics at a great discount, if not for free, because Karen realized at that time, beginning of the pandemic, that there was going to be a lot of anxiety. And we thought, well, if we have a powerful tool for anxiety, a lot of people are going to get crushed financially with the pandemic. So
Yeah.
let's give them a free option. And she's been so generous. She's left that free option up there. And of course, we hope that people who have the resources will pay for it, but we don't want anybody to miss out on this opportunity through lack of financial reserve. So there's a free button there. But that Whole Mind Bundle is just one of many offerings from sacredacoustics.com. I highly recommend people look at the multiple other offerings there. In addition, on the ebenalexander.com website, there's something, the 33-day journey into the heart of consciousness, a little banner that'll wiggle in your face as soon as you get there. And that 33-day journey is a workbook. It's a companion course that's all free. There's never any request for money. And more than 14,000 people have taken it, and many of them have left their comments, help each other, experiences, et cetera. And all that is tagged on to each one of those 33 days. So people can get going right now just by going to ebenalexander.com, click on the 33-day journey, and start getting those emails, and you'll get included in those 33 days are 4 sacred acoustic sound files that can be used for meditation, along with all the instruction of how that is to be done. So there's no excuse, people. You can start getting up to speed on this right now, and any lack of financial resources doesn't do it. But getting back to Anna Yusum's study, very briefly, the results, people who listened to Sacred Acoustics over 2 weeks had a 26% reduction in anxiety symptoms. It's a state
Wow.
trait anxiety inventory, which measures not just how you are today, but your general tendencies, the
Right.
traits. And so people tend to improve over time and much less anxious. And so 26% in those who listen to the tones, only a 7% reduction in people who got standard talk psychotherapy for those 2 weeks.
Huh.
So just listening to these tones was a powerful way to get relief, from a lot of the angst of the day, and certainly from anxieties. And I promise you, there's a lot more going on there than just relief of anxiety. It
Yeah.
has to do with putting that little ego voice into timeout, because every addiction, every big fear that we have in this world is linked to that ego. And there are ways to rise above that when we connect more with higher soul and kind of the interconnected primordial mind that we're all sharing.
That
So,
was the one thing I really found in the hospital was that uh, my ego brain, I had to really to work with it to be like, okay, stop looking at your surroundings and come back into that inner work, exactly what you're talking about,
mhm,
because the ego brain wanted to argue with these people. Let's be real. Like it wanted to argue. It wanted to, no, you're wrong. This is not correct information. Or they would say something that in my view was highly abusive or was abusive to my mom, and immediately I was like, I wanted to get up on my high horse and do something, and then I was like, that's not what I'm here for. I'm
that's not
here.
what you should use your energy
Mm,
for.
exactly, and it was so tempting. Like I can understand how people kind of get pulled into that, because that's where you want to go with it. Your being is just like, how dare you? But it was like that's not the priority right now, number
Right,
one. And how is that serving my healing? That
right.
became a really, really chief principle of this. And I've had, through exactly the meditation and the Monroe Institute, who I've had a number of their teachers and their president on the show as well. Amazing people. For everybody listening, please, please, please go and investigate the links that Dr. Alexander has just talked about, both with Sacred Acoustics and the Monroe Institute. They're phenomenal. And that was the one thing that I really found was if I'm going to interact and interconnect with the spirits that I know interact and connect with me, then I can't lose that vibrational stance of and fall into that negativity, that the arguing and the fighting and the this and that and the other thing. If I get into that, I lose my connection, or I don't lose, can't really lose it, but you block the connection with that source energy. And I'm like, that source energy is what's going to flow through and do the healing.
Right.
So that really became a big focus. And man, that, like you're saying, the binaural beats, for those of you who are out there who thinking that this is all this is woo woo, it absolutely is not. This will shift you within your first meditation. I don't know if you found that as well, but I found the first time I ever did this, which was a number of years ago, immediately I could feel a difference.
Well, I can attest that for me, obviously I have that touch point of the near-death experience. So,
Right.
you might argue that with that touch point, I have this advantage. But I will say that Karen and I have given hundreds of workshops, and also point out that sacred acoustics is the most modern and advanced form of binaural beat brainwave entrainment that I know of.
Yeah.
And there are reasons why it is so incredibly good. And part of it is that Kevin is a real master at putting these things together. But each one of these sound files that you find on Sacred Acoustics took months to even a year or more to design. I mean, they're extremely complex, extremely well thought out, very well down to the tiniest fraction of a decimal point in terms of the frequencies, carriers, and what's used for the result. So in my comparison, there are other forms of binaural beats, but they really do not pass muster compared to Sacred Acoustics because of that very driven kind of philosophy of Karen and Kevin to get this out to the world and make it as strong as can be. And a little word of advice to people: don't make the mistake of downloading anything that you consider to be a source of binaural beats from YouTube or from Apple Store. The reason is that those venues insist on compression. And compression starts to throw out some of the most useful, powerful frequencies. So you have to be very careful about your sources of binaural beat brainwave entrainment. But, the sacredacoustics.com website is an excellent resource, whether you're ordering CDs or want streaming, downloads, what have you. So highly recommend that. And also just the information available at sacredacoustics.com for anybody who wants to get going in meditation is very extensive. And so highly recommended. And the compression, though, if you pull it down from YouTube or Apple Store, eliminates most of the good stuff. So you're getting, it's like you're taking a fine Cabernet Sauvignon and adding dishwater to it. Don't do that. It's a big mistake. Just stick with the pure stuff. And also there's an excellent app for the iPhone and for Samsung phones running Sacred Acoustics. And you can adjust the voice volume and things like that to completely eliminate the voice, because usually the idea is to use verbally guided when you first start a meditation to kind of give you the idea behind that meditation. But soon thereafter, I get to a point where I turn the voice volume all the way off. All I want is the pure tones, because if you have any language thrown in there, any verbal instruction, tends to pull you back into here now sense of self, into your brain. Whereas the tones themselves, you can learn to ride them and get into a very deep hypnagogic space. That is the space between awake and asleep, where your ego mind is in timeout and not playing any role whatsoever. So anxiety and concerns tend to evaporate, but you have this clear territory. I've gotten to a clear light state through the use of Sacred Acoustics. It's not that common, but wow, when you get there, that complete non-self is kind of a stunning place to be. And of course, words would drive you out of that in an instant. So that's another reason just to be going with pure tones and not with verbal guidance. But again, verbal guidance can be very important early on when you're first becoming familiar with one of the tones. And there are many different tones on sacredacoustics.com. And also she has a page on that website where, whatever your goals may be, you can match them up to the specific sacred acoustics tones that will help you get there. So it's very good information, very high quality, to help people with wherever they are in their current soul journey, to help get them there. It's all at sacredacoustics.com. I use Sacred Acoustics an hour or two, maybe 3 a day if I have time, and I do that every day I possibly can, which is most days, and I've been doing that now for about 12 or so years plus. So incredibly powerful. And as you say, even though it may not work the first time for every person, sooner or later it tends to work for a lot of people. And I can tell you out of our workshops, we often have people where their very first exposure to a sacred acoustics meditation, and they are having connections with souls of departed loved ones, meeting spirit guides, having this beautiful sense of the oneness of that God love force that has been so defining for so many near-death experiencers. So you can get a lot of power out of meditation and of learning that, the little voice in your head is not your only mode of information acquisition. And that little voice, in fact, is your enemy for a lot of spiritual targets and goals. So learning to navigate that hypnagogic space and take what material the world gives to you, the universe gives to you, can be very valid. And for me, the little Eben Alexander ego voice can ask a question, state a request, make an observation at the very beginning of the meditation, but then I've learned to just ride those tones and ride my breathing. And that allows that ego voice to go into timeout and for me to really get deeply into that rich spiritual realm where so much can happen. And that's where we learn so much more about our power as sentient beings, eternal souls who happen to be temporarily residing in these physical bodies. But we have a tremendous amount of power over how the course of life goes for that physical body. And that's where meditation and centering prayer can really shine.
Absolutely. And I think just to add what you're saying, because I think you're dead on, is that the healing process doesn't always have to make sense either. I think a lot of people look at this in a very linear fashion where it's like, okay, well, X has to happen and B has to happen and C has to happen and so on and so forth. And that's really not how the universe plays the game. And that's the other part of, I think, that people get hung up in. And it comes back again to the ego voice. I think what you're saying is that you get hung up in maybe the news that the doctors are telling you that, this has to be, if this was their last patient's progression, now it has to be your progression, so on and so forth. But there really is, when you get into that state of being and you start to delve into this realm of healing, and healing yourself, stuff can start happening that is not on the ABC chart of how things are supposed to go. And the universe just doesn't play by the ego's rules. It just
Right.
doesn't. And it's like, if we can get out of the way of that, which I think meditation really helps us do, it helps us get the hell out of the way of whatever source has got going, then stuff starts moving. And for me, I know, like, I was my recovery has been remarkably quicker than what I thought that it was going to be. And as I say, still having, issues with certain things and whatever, like I still have a journey to go. But to be where I am now, hands down, if you probably had have asked the physicians, well, I know if you had have asked the physicians at that point, they would have been like,
Not going to happen.
not happening.
Well, congratulations. And the more these kind of stories get out to the world, the more people realize they have tremendous power to
Yeah.
bring healing into their own situation. And I often remind people that in many ways, the universe is kind of like a mirror. And the more kind of unconditional love and kindness, compassion, mercy, acceptance, forgiveness I can put out to this world, the more it seems to reflect back on me.
Yeah.
And this is really part of that bigger message of soul journey and coming to face that the ego and its demands are not really your best ally in getting into these deep spiritual
Yeah.
kind of realizations, but it's much more about growing into the souls we came here to be. And that's far grander than that little ego mind.
Oh yeah, like and I think too, it's one of the things that I've learned throughout this has been taking a hard look at the people around me as well. And their response to what has happened has been very eye-opening and very heartbreaking in a lot of ways, because I've had people who I did not expect to step up. And then I've had people who I've had at my dinner table who have literally said, sorry, I'm too busy. Too busy.
Oh.
Too busy to visit, too busy after I got home from the hospital, maybe one text message, no phone calls. And I think, in a way it served me, because it was, as I say, it's information, it's knowledge. It's I don't think they were supposed to accompany me forward. I think their
Right.
role was over. But it was very shocking to see sort of this line that was drawn between the people who were like, what can I do to help? Because like I don't drive, so bringing things into the house after I got home was very difficult, because if you can't walk there or take the bus, then it's not
Right.
coming into my house, and I couldn't. And my mom thankfully was there and could take the bus, but she was weighed down with the burden of me being sick, and I couldn't really be left by myself for a little while and whatever. And it was that part was another part of the journey for me, was like, no, that's okay. They're not supposed to be here. And maybe their time is done. And there's a new aspect of this journey that's unfolding, that's coming. And I have to be open to it rather than sit in the negativity of bitterness or blame or anger.
Right.
It
That's no place to be.
It's not. And
Gratitude is a very important ingredient to remember.
bingo.
All the time, everywhere, with any
Yep.
situation, gratitude for every breath.
Yeah.
That was one of the most beautiful lessons from my near-death experience, was a tremendous focus
Absolutely.
on gratitude ever since, and a realization that, each and every one of these breaths could be my last, but I've come to learn that I can trust in the universe to take care of me. All is
Yes.
well is another way of putting it, and if you have a big enough perspective, you come to realize always that all is well. Those are the words I
Yeah.
was uttering to people around me within 30 minutes of waking up from coma
Right.
and being extubated. My youngest sister, Phyllis, she got there about 30 or 40 minutes after they took out the breathing tube, and she said it was so amazing after this whole week of the doctors warning the family that I might very well die from this whole thing, from that meningitis I had back in November 2008. And then there I was 30 to 40 minutes after being extubated, looking at everybody in the eyes going, "Don't worry, all is well.
Yeah.
Don't worry,
I love it.
all is well." And I seemed so confident, and I don't even remember that because I
Yeah.
was still, uh, the meningitis was very effective. My amnesia is still somewhat in
Yeah.
play. I was just beginning my recovery, and I had about 36 hours of a paranoid delusional psychotic nightmare after the extubation. So I was still kind of in and
Yeah.
out, but I was so reassured by my journey,
Yeah.
which is all I remembered when I first woke up on that ICU bed. That's why I had such confidence telling everybody, "Don't worry,
Yeah.
all is well."
But I know that feeling.
Yeah.
I can tell you I know that feeling. It's just this utter calm. Like I knew I was gonna be okay. And what was interesting for me was that what was emotionally difficult and damaging was the people around me that were trying to pull me under. And the contrast of knowing my well-being so well and having so many people and complete lack of sleep and lack of food and everything, um, having that contrast was so just diametrically opposed to each other. That's what was really wearing me down in it.
Right.
But that calm that you're talking about, I absolutely know what you're talking about. It was, and as I say, the nurses would comment. They would be like, "I don't understand how you're sitting here and you're so calm about this." So, basically because all is well. Yeah,
Well, all I can say, I'm very grateful for the nurses that were around me because they were all very positive.
that's
I was at
amazing.
Lynchburg General Hospital, and the doctors were incredible. And I'll confess, I'm a Duke medical graduate, and a lot of the really great docs at Lynchburg General Hospital had come up from Duke, or they flavored it there so that the quality of medical care overall was very high. And so I'm very grateful I was in a place like that. And it's really just important that you have, at least one kind of team leader, a physician who can really help you get there, or a nurse. I mean, nurses can be very good at instilling that um, kind of courage and understanding in people and trust in the universe, because ultimately that's
Yeah.
what we're seeking. And for anyone who is tempted to pray, I would offer the book "Healing Words" by Larry Dossey. He's a physician, incredibly brilliant doctor and scientist, and he's written several books about prayer. And Healing Words is a real good one. It's highly recommended by Dr. Larry Dossey. And also, one other book I can recommend of his is called The One Mind, and it parallels in many ways our book, Living in a Mindful Universe. And these are very good resources for the modern kind of spiritually minded scientist who's trying to make sense of all this,
Yeah.
because they bring the science and spirituality together in promoting this notion of the one mind, the God mind that we all share. And it's a very, very important concept that's really emerging strongly in science now, and we are looking more at the brain as a reducing valve or filter or transceiver that allows us to, it basically dissociates a little eddy current off of
Right.
that one mind, that God mind, and that's what we have as our mind, but it's never really truly isolated. So you can demonstrate, for example, twins, identical twins, about 35% of them will have powerful telepathic experiences.
Yeah.
And it completely knocks away materialism and its false sense that the brain is creating consciousness and only has access to information available through our sensory modalities. Because telepathy is a very real effect. And twins are just an easy way to demonstrate it, because identical twins have pretty much the same genome, and that has given them a fairly similar nervous system.
Okay.
So their nervous systems act like resonant antennas that can trade
Right.
information very easily across time and space. And they use what I would call the entanglement field. The quantum entanglement field is the same as the mental and spiritual field. They're what we use, and that entanglement field is something that connects us across space and time, and that's what allows for things like life reviews. We've already mentioned half of NDEs have life reviews, and a third of those people who have the life review think their entire life is involved. And you might wonder, how can you have a whole life review during a 10-minute cardiac arrest? And it's because those people are in a realm that's completely beyond space and time.
Right.
It's an eternal realm, birth, death, everything in between simultaneously presented to you. It's a whole different kind of knowing that's far more powerful than when we're stuck here in the river of time and believing in the earthly illusion of self, as opposed to realizing we're far grander than that. And this is where meditation and centering prayer can allow all of us to come into that expansive sense of self, realize we're actually sharing the dream of the one mind, that quantum indeterminacy is right there at the heart of human free will. And also, we need ultimately in our ontology, that is our understanding of reality, we need to work in the fact that these life reviews are so comprehensive. They're a reliving of events, not just a remembering, and that they involve all souls involved are reflected in the life review and your perceptions. Your subjectivity during the life review is not only yours, but it's that of those around you who were influenced by your thoughts and actions. And that's why I say we're sharing the dream of the one mind. But the very fact that in life reviews there's a reliving of events, not just a remembering, should tell you something about how important our existence is to this universe at large. It does matter. Our thoughts and actions matter a lot. And that also means we have a tremendous responsibility to treat each other and all of our fellow beings, not just humans, but animals too, with the respect of being, the sacred divine entities that they are in the spiritual universe. And
Yeah.
once we recognize that oneness and realize that life reviews are the golden rule, treat others as you would like to be treated, written into the very fabric of the universe, it helps us all come into a much greater alignment with kind of the meaning and purpose of the universe at large and how we share such meaning and purpose with our fellow beings in creating the world of our dreams.
Yeah, and everything that I've ever read about the life review, and from people that have come back, they've all said that it's very non-judgmental, as I think many religions and whatnot sort of pin this idea as, you're going to be judged at the gates, and I don't get that impression from anybody that has come back that it's
No,
it's a
it's not a judgment
no,
because in the life review, we get to experience it. We get
yeah,
to feel what it's like to receive what we dish
right,
out to others.
yeah,
So it's a very effective and practical tool
yeah,
for teaching us, don't hurt others. If you hurt another, you're hurting yourself.
yeah,
And the life review is a beautiful example of that. And so there's no judgment from anywhere else. It's just we would all tend to be better treated. And in the life review, if you've been mistreating others, you feel what that felt like, and it doesn't feel good.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I think life reviews are ultimately why all of humanity, in spite of the recent transgressions, with the warfare and violence in Ukraine and Middle East. Those are horrific kind of steppings back into the past. But if you look at the history through 20th and early 21st century and look at number of, say, violent crimes and um, battlefield deaths, et cetera, humanity's actually been improving tremendously up
absolutely.
until these two major backward steps that happened in the Middle East and Ukraine. But overall, humanity is gently being nudged into a far more positive, harmonious way. And I would argue that that's largely through life reviews having this effect.
That's really interesting. I hadn't thought about it like that, but yeah, I mean, eh, people that more and more people are coming forward, of course, having these near-death experiences and having these, have not only the life reviews, but I think connection with non-physical in general, no matter how it comes to them. And because that's one of the things that I've noticed as well. Like, I mean, I used to get called all the time to do, shows like haunted hospitals and like sort of these ghost shows and things like that, just to come on, just to talk about parapsychology and
Right.
whatnot. And they always wanted the fear narrative about non-physical, and I was never willing to give it. So oftentimes I would go in and I would shoot these shows, and then half of my stuff would end up on the cutting room floor because I wasn't feeding the narrative of that this is a big scary thing that we're connecting with. But what I've found really interesting is that I think I've outlasted them
Right.
because those shows are now fading,
Right.
and this information is now becoming more dominant. Their ratings, like for not necessarily those ones because those ones haven't been on for a while, but those types of shows, the ratings are falling, and they're not getting renewed. There's been a number of people online that have posed the question, well, why is that? Why are these shows falling away? What's everybody's opinion on this? And I said, and I've told them, I think that's what's going on. I said, I think people are connecting with this stuff on a genuine level. They're understanding that this connection with non-physical isn't this terrifying thing. It's wonderful, beautiful. It's an experience we're supposed to be having. And now they're looking for more. They're looking for something that's more tangible, real.
Right.
And so things like, your sacred acoustics, all of those things are tools that people can be using to get that answer, to get more out of what this experience I think is supposed to be.
I agree, and I think also in some ways the world is maturing.
Yeah.
And a lot of the kind of fear factor is more of a kind of a childish response to it, and more of the
Yeah.
acknowledgement of the potential for amazement, beauty, and the reassurance of long-term soul connections and binding force of love replaces that kind of childish fear with a more active, kind of mature curiosity about, well, what really happens? What should I expect when I leave this world?
Yeah.
And that's where I think maybe the uh, the demand for the type of shows is shifting over time. Now, many people would remark when I say we're having a general maturation, they would look at our political situation and say, well, what are you talking about? Because obviously the political situation in our current era, in the United States at least,
Oh,
is,
in Canada too.
well, it's
Yeah,
just,
we're a mess up here, believe me.
it's abominable. Well, all I can say is, don't lose hope, people, because
Yeah.
what I would say is a lot of the kind of recoil and conflict and polarization you see in politics is driven through that fear factor. Fear, fear,
Yeah.
fear, fear. Push the buttons. And a lot of it is just about clickbait. Some of it is confusion about AI and misinformation and disinformation that might be enhanced from AI. But ultimately, this scientific revolution that we're talking about, that is that, no, physicalism, materialism is false. Most scientists have come to conclude that is true. And certainly those who study the brain-mind connection, the nature of reality, have come to seriously question those old ideas to the point where they no longer work. And we now realize that something like consciousness is far more unified and more primordial and more involved in the apparent emergent physical universe. So the more we can learn about consciousness and our free will, the better. And this is why meditation, centering prayer, all the scientific work, for example, that we discuss in our book, Living in a Mindful Universe, it's all about the one mind, that God mind that we all co-create with. And but we're also all interconnected. That's why it's so important to remember that binding force of love is a tremendous force of healing. And my advice here is that a lot of the political conflict that you see in many ways is kind of manufactured, and it is part of a recoil of the fundamentalists who realize that their petty little notions are going to end up on the chopping block and on the cutting room floor as this paradigm shift in science pointing to the oneness that we all share, that oneness with the God mind, that binding force of love, and all the healing and wholeness that it can bring to this world. That's the way this humanity is going to move forward. It won't be through the crazy, fear-based, politically polarized insanity that you currently see among some of our political folks. I
Yeah.
won't go any further than that. But the bottom line is I'm optimistic about the future, but that involves a future that is transforming radically from the status quo and how we got here and to a far more positive direction of unification. Where we realize we're all in this together and that human beings are here to help other human beings and to make life better on this planet, not worse.
Well, I completely agree with you, and I love it. And I think that's a great place to break this conversation. This has been so wonderful. Thank you so much for being here and doing this. I'm going to put the links to everything in the show notes so that people can just go and start clicking and get going with this process, whether you're going through something medical right now, or you're just going through maybe an emotional crisis, or whether you're just totally okay and you just want to expand what you're doing. Wherever you are on the journey, this is such a great place to start for everybody to just reintegrate those practices and have something, no matter what's going on in your experience, that you can lean on and fall back on, because you just like you and I've talked about, you don't know what's gonna go on. You need the thing to be able to fall back on, so that when stuff goes down, that you can move yourself through it, no matter what's going on externally, whether it be stress from the internet or stress from something that's happening to you. So I think it's just wonderful. So thank you so much.
Well, good. Well, thank you, Morgan, and thanks for sharing your story. So glad you're doing so well, and a beautiful example of how kind of trust and strength sensed with the universe can aid in healing. So glad it worked in your situation. Thanks for sharing that.
You and me both.
All right.
It's tax season, and at LifeLock, we know you're tired of numbers. But here's a big one you need to hear. Billions. That's the amount of money in refunds the IRS has flagged for possible identity fraud. Now here's another big number, 100 million. That's how many data points LifeLock monitors every second. If your identity is stolen, we'll fix it guaranteed. One last big number, save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast for the threats you can't control. Terms apply.
Don't chew on that, Max.
Cooper loves that chew too.
Oh, now he's into Cooper's food. Wow, he is loving it. What do you feed Cooper?
Blue Buffalo Life Protection Formula. He never leaves a crumb. I love it because it's made with high-quality protein, nutrient-rich fruits and veggies, and wholesome whole grains.
Looks like we're switching to Blue.
Blue Buffalo foods are made with the superior ingredients your dog needs to thrive. Can your dog food say that? Visit feedbluefood.com to learn more.
I hope you guys got as much out of that as I did. And thank you guys for listening. Thank you guys for sharing in this journey with me. It's been an amazing one. And I'm so grateful every day to be able to do this show with you guys. And for all the listeners out there who really, really cash in on this, that really grab the links, grab the books, read the stories, and are involved in this incredible journey, because it's not always an easy one. Sometimes things manifest that we have to get through that are teaching tools to create something more, to expand consciousness. And I think that's really, really what's gone on with my own experience. I know Dr. Eben Alexander, I know he would say the same thing, that things happen to us. Things happen for us, sorry. Things don't happen to us, they happen for us. And sometimes they happen through us. And I think that's something that we really need to take away from any experience that we're having that is trialsome and difficult. And even in the moment, be able to find the gratitude for the little things, the tiny things, which is something that I had to practice pretty hard in November. But when you have that to fall back on, when you really, really have that to fall back on, and you do the work and you have a foundation, whatever that looks like for you. We're not saying that there's one right one or one wrong one. Everybody's got something unique to them. But these practices, let me tell you, will help you along the way, whether it be to enhance a spiritual practice that you already have, or create something brand new for yourself and create that connection. But it's so precious and it's so important. And I thank you guys for being here and moving through this with me. I highly recommend, please get Eben Alexander's books and go to his website, download the 33 days. It's remarkably incredible. And this is a guy who knows what he's doing. He knows what he's talking about. If you want to get started, what an amazing way to do so. So that being said, thank you for joining me on this incredible expedition, my dear listeners. And remember, there is no line between the natural and the supernatural. All is consciousness. Until next time, stay curious, friends. Supernatural Circumstances is a co-production of Entity Seeker, Paranormal Research and Teachings, and the 20th Plane. This podcast is a part of the Curious Cast podcast network. You can find out more about me, Morgan Knutson, and book me for live appearances at entityseeker.ca. You can also email the show at supernaturalcircumstances.com.
Hello there.
Thursdays on Global.
I'm Madeline Matlock.
She's the lawyer with the legendary name.
Don't underestimate Miss Matlock. This woman's a shark.
You know it, baby.
The one you can trust, even if she has to bend the rules.
Things aren't always as black and white as they seem.
To crack a case.
This is how I get things done.
Emmy-winning actress Kathy Bates is Matlock. All new Thursdays at 9 Eastern on Global. Stream on Stack TV.